Welcome to Real Alien Abduction Stories, Encounters Too Convincing to Ignore. Tonight, we step into a world where the boundaries between reality and the unknown blur, where ordinary people claim extraordinary experiences that defy explanation. Real Alien Abduction Stories, Encounters Too Convincing to Ignore. This is not fiction, not a tale spun for thrill alone. These are accounts from individuals who have returned with memories they cannot erase, moments so vivid and unsettling that even skeptics pause, unsettled, wondering if there is a truth hidden in the shadows. Imagine waking in the dead of night, sensing an invisible presence hovering near your bed. Ordinary objects suddenly feel strange, your own body feels foreign, and time seems to warp around you. For those who have experienced abduction, these sensations are just the beginning. Some speak of being paralyzed, unable to cry out, as figures with unnatural shapes and piercing eyes observe them. Others recall journeys through corridors of light or rooms filled with instruments that seem to defy earthly logic, recording secrets their minds struggle to comprehend. And yet, the stories are not only about fear. They are about mystery, curiosity, and the lingering question of what lies beyond our comprehension. Memories return in fragments, dreams bleed into reality, and for some, the encounters leave marks, physical, emotional, and inexplicable. Families, friends, and even investigators are left grappling with disbelief, trying to reconcile the mundane with the inexplicable. Tonight, you are invited to witness these accounts, to step closer to the edge of the unknown. You may doubt, you may fear, but the question remains: if it could happen to someone else, could it happen to you? As we unfold these chilling tales, prepare to question the ordinary and confront the possibility that some truths are too strange, too compelling, and too convincing to ignore. Before the extraordinary events that would later define their lives, the people who experienced these alien encounters lived lives that seemed entirely ordinary, lives that could belong to anyone. Take, for instance, Karen, a schoolteacher in a quiet suburb, who spent her mornings preparing lesson plans and afternoons guiding students through the routine rhythms of algebra and literature. Her evenings were filled with family dinners, the hum of dishwasher cycles, and the occasional television show in the living room. Similarly, Michael, a construction worker, woke before sunrise each day, loading his truck with tools, waving goodbye to his wife, and returning home at night with calloused hands and a weary body. These were lives governed by clocks, calendars, and the comforting predictability of daily patterns. It is within this framework of routine that the subtle anomalies began. At first, they were easy to dismiss: a flickering light in the night sky, too faint to identify, a strange ringing in the ears upon waking, a sensation of being watched in moments of solitude. These incidents were easily attributed to fatigue, imagination, or environmental quirks. Yet, when they occurred repeatedly, a quiet unease began to settle in. Jane, a nurse who worked long shifts at the hospital, started noticing that hours of her night seemed to vanish. She would remember entering her home, turning on lights, and moments later find herself in bed with no memory of the interim. Michael, too, noticed similar lapses. He would be fixing a fence in the morning and suddenly realize that hours had passed with no recollection of what he had done. The world seemed to tick on predictably, yet for them, small cracks had begun to form in the fabric of ordinary life. Alongside these temporal anomalies were strange dreams that could not be easily dismissed. Some described being pulled toward glowing corridors or distant rooms filled with figures that did not belong in this world. Others recounted sensations of floating or being unable to move, as if their bodies were being observed or manipulated in ways that defied logic. These dreams were not frightening at first. They were surreal, like fragments of forgotten memories or half-remembered films. But as the incidents multiplied, the dreams grew sharper, more detailed, and increasingly unsettling. Karen began waking each morning with an unshakable tension, a sense that the day might bring more than routine challenges. Jane noticed bruises on her arms she could not explain, faint but undeniable, as if evidence of experiences that had occurred outside her conscious awareness. What makes these accounts profoundly relatable is that they began in the mundane. The characters were teachers, nurses, construction workers, and parents, individuals whose lives revolved around work schedules, grocery runs, school pickups, and household chores. There was nothing inherently extraordinary about them, and yet it became clear that anyone could be a target. These stories unders a chilling realization: abduction does not discriminate. It is not reserved for the eccentric, the fringe believers, or those who actively search for extraterrestrial encounters. It can touch anyone, anywhere, in the quietest corners of their everyday lives. Even pets sometimes seemed to sense the anomalies. Dogs that normally slept quietly through the night began barking at unseen intrusions. Cats, typically aloof and indifferent, would freeze mid-step, staring into empty corners of rooms as if fixated on some invisible presence. Such small, inexplicable reactions added to the growing sense that the environment itself had shifted, that reality had begun to fracture in subtle but persistent ways. Yet life, by necessity, continued. Families went to work and school, errands were completed, and weekends were spent in parks or shopping centers. There was a rhythm to these lives that provided comfort even amidst the subtle strangeness. The juxtaposition of normality and anomaly created a tension that only grew as experiences intensified. Michael recalls one afternoon when he paused mid-task, holding a hammer over a wooden beam, only to find that nearly 3 hours had elapsed with no memory of how he had spent them. At first, he laughed nervously, attributing it to daydreaming or distraction. But laughter faded when he discovered similar gaps occurring with increasing frequency, sometimes accompanied by bruises or disorientation. For many abductees, the earliest signs were so subtle that they almost went unnoticed. The glimmer of lights outside a window late at night, a sudden change in the hum of household electronics, or the feeling of being gently nudged awake, all of these phenomena were easily explained away. Yet the very fact that they could be dismissed is what makes the subsequent escalation so profound. Life seemed normal, almost painfully so, as if the universe were preparing them for something that would shatter the boundaries of what they had always believed possible. The ordinary served as a backdrop, a stark contrast to the extraordinary events that would follow. And then, the first encounters began to assert themselves more tangibly. The missing time grew longer, the dreams more vivid, and the sensations more intrusive. Subtle signs, previously ignorable, now began to demand attention. For some, objects in their homes appeared moved or slightly altered. Karen once entered her kitchen to find all the knives lined up in a precise pattern on the counter, an arrangement she was certain she had not made. Jane discovered a small metallic implant beneath her skin, inexplicable and unexplainable, which she later had removed, but never fully understood. Even mundane routines became tinged with suspicion. Were these lapses coincidences, or were they the first deliberate intrusions into lives that had, until then, been peaceful and predictable? It is this gradual build-up that sets the stage for the abductions themselves. By illustrating lives steeped in routine yet subtly disrupted, we create a sense of empathy and familiarity with the audience. Viewers can imagine themselves walking in these shoes, experiencing the dissonance of normalcy interrupted by incomprehensible phenomena. The transition from ordinary life to inexplicable events is almost imperceptible, mirroring the experiences of those who have lived through it. One moment, the characters are brushing their teeth, preparing dinner, or tucking children into bed. The next, they are confronted with lights in the sky, missing hours, or memories that cannot be traced to waking life. The quiet before the storm is a deceptively calm landscape, but the cracks are widening. By focusing on the ordinary first, the extraordinary becomes all the more impactful. This section is not merely a prelude, it is an essential foundation, emphasizing that alien encounters do not announce themselves with fanfare. They infiltrate lives quietly, almost imperceptibly, until the moment arrives when normalcy is irrevocably shattered. The audience is invited to feel the disorientation, the creeping unease, and the subtle terror of living on the edge of understanding. The ordinary life of the abductee is not a stage set for chaos. It is a mirror in which the audience sees themselves. As we prepare to transition into the first encounters, the audience carries with them the sense of everyday security gradually being eroded. The calm is deceptive, the familiar becomes strange, and the world they thought they knew begins to feel like a place where anything is possible. It is in this fragile space between comfort and the unknown that the real tension emerges, readying viewers for the stories that follow. As the quiet tension of ordinary life grew, subtle disturbances began to escalate into experiences that could no longer be ignored. What began as flickering lights or fleeting dreams soon transformed into sensations that were tangible, vivid, and terrifyingly real. For many abductees, the first encounters were not dramatic or cinematic in the way films portray. They were insidious, almost whispering their presence into lives that had seemed entirely predictable. The transition from ordinary life to extraordinary intrusion was gradual. A shift felt more in the mind and body than seen with the eyes alone, until one night it became undeniable. Consider Mark, a software engineer who worked late nights at his home office. One evening, while adjusting code on his screen, he noticed a faint luminescence seeping through the edges of his closed blinds. At first, he assumed it was a reflection from a streetlight or passing car, yet the glow pulsed with a rhythm that felt almost deliberate. When he turned off his monitors and stepped closer to the window, the light seemed to intensify, bathing the room in a pale, otherworldly shimmer. The air grew thick, carrying a subtle metallic scent that he could not identify, and he felt the prickling sensation of being observed, as if invisible eyes were studying his every movement. Mark's rational mind searched for logical explanations: neighborhood lights, reflections, hallucination induced by exhaustion, but every instinct screamed that something beyond comprehension had entered his space. For others, the experiences were auditory, haunting, and impossible to ignore. Linda, a nurse accustomed to the chaos of hospital wards, described waking to the sound of low humming vibrations resonating from the corners of her bedroom. The sound was not mechanical, nor did it resemble any natural phenomenon she had encountered. It fluctuated in pitch, rising and falling like a distant choir of metallic voices, compelling her to sit up in bed and strain to discern its origin. As she moved, the air seemed to thicken around her, pressing lightly against her skin, an intangible weight that carried both menace and curiosity. The sensations were unmistakable. She was not dreaming nor hallucinating. Someone was in her room, observing, perhaps waiting for her to acknowledge its presence. Visual phenomena were equally unsettling. Karen, introduced in the previous section, recalled a night when the glow of her bedside lamp was swallowed by a pale, cold light emanating from nowhere, bathing her entire room in a hue she could not name. Shapes seemed to ripple across the walls, morphing from familiar furniture into shadowed figures that appeared humanoid yet disturbingly alien. The shapes lingered just long enough for her to catch the details: elongated limbs, disproportionately large heads, eyes that reflected light like liquid mirrors. She froze, paralyzed by fear and disbelief, watching as the figures moved with a fluidity that defied human biomechanics. In that moment, the mundane bedroom, a place of comfort and routine, transformed into a stage for an encounter beyond her understanding. Physical sensations often accompanied these early contacts. Abductees reported sudden tingling across their skin, a sensation akin to electricity dancing beneath the surface. Some felt their bodies lifted slightly from their beds or immobilized as if held down by unseen forces. Michael, the construction worker, recounted an incident when he awoke to the weight of something pressing on his chest. He could not breathe properly, yet the presence was not aggressive. It was curious, investigative, almost clinical in nature. Simultaneously, he noticed a faint, ozone-like odor permeating the room, sharp and unnatural, accompanied by the low hum of machinery he could not see. These experiences combined sensory input and emotional intensity, leaving witnesses overwhelmed, disoriented, and profoundly aware of their vulnerability. The emotional spectrum during these first contacts was complex. Fear was nearly universal, yet it intertwined with fascination, disbelief, and awe. Some felt an unexplainable pull toward the phenomena, a magnetic curiosity that drew them closer even as their rational minds urged flight. Jane, who had previously noticed missing hours, described a trembling excitement at witnessing her first luminous encounter. She felt simultaneously terrified and strangely calm, as if some part of her consciousness recognized these intrusions as a profound, if incomprehensible, truth about the universe. This emotional complexity is a hallmark of first contact experiences. They defy categorization, blending terror, curiosity, and even reverence into a single, overwhelming impression. The sensory details of these encounters were acute. Lights ranged from sharp, searing beams that painted entire rooms in unnatural colors to soft glows that seemed to hover, pulsing like living organisms. Sounds could be melodic or mechanical, high-pitched or rumbling low frequencies, often resonating inside the skull as well as the environment. Smells were equally disorienting: ozone, metallic tangs, or fragrances that carried no earthly association. The emotional component amplified the physical. Terror sharpened perception, or intensified light and sound, and confusion heightened the alienness of every detail. The encounters were immersive, unavoidable, and etched into memory with an intensity that made disbelief difficult to sustain. Timing and location were unpredictable. Some experiences occurred in the dead of night when homes were silent, and every creak or gust of wind could be mistaken for the phenomenon itself. Others took place during waking hours, often in moments of solitude, when abductees were least likely to encounter rational explanations. Sleep became a fragile boundary between ordinary life and extraordinary intrusion. Dreams blurred with reality. Waking consciousness overlapped with alien observation. For those affected, the familiar rhythms of daily life, work, chores, family interactions, became punctuated with uncertainty. No longer could one trust that hours would pass uninterrupted or that nights would remain solely within the domain of sleep. The first contacts were often marked by sudden disappearance or movement of objects. Abductees reported doors that they were certain had been closed now found ajar, small items shifted from one place to another, or notes and tools arranged in precise, unexplainable patterns. Such alterations heightened the sense of intrusion, confirming that these events were not mere hallucinations. The environment itself became an accomplice to the phenomenon, offering physical evidence that something beyond ordinary perception was at work. For many, these experiences occurred in isolation, intensifying the psychological impact. There was no immediate witness, no friend or family member to validate their perceptions. This isolation created a dual tension: the need to share and understand, contrasted with fear of disbelief or ridicule. Mark confided in no one about the luminescent glow that enveloped his room, worried that his reputation as a rational, grounded individual might be undermined. Jane struggled with guilt and doubt, questioning her own sanity even as the encounters persisted. The secrecy of these experiences amplified their intensity, leaving witnesses caught between the extraordinary event and the everyday expectation of skepticism. Yet these initial contacts were rarely violent or overtly threatening. They were investigative, measured, and often accompanied by sensations of observation and study. The beings, if they were indeed extraterrestrial, seemed more curious than malevolent, probing consciousness, memory, and emotion. This subtlety made the encounters all the more unnerving, as the ordinary environment was infiltrated by presence without warning, judgment, or immediate explanation. The ambiguity of intent deepened the fear, allowing the mind to oscillate between terror and fascination with each recurrence. As these encounters increased, abductees began to notice a pattern, however faint. Timing often coincided with periods of solitude or vulnerability. lights, sounds, and presences appeared when they were alone or asleep, moments when conscious defense was minimal. The encounters followed no predictable sequence, yet they left a cumulative imprint, growing unease, heightened awareness, and an emerging sense that the ordinary was no longer safe. The subtle signs that once seemed dismissible were now unmistakable, forming a prelude to experiences that would soon become impossible to ignore. The transition from ordinary disruptions to undeniable contact is essential in understanding these stories. From faint lights and strange sounds, the experiences evolved into full-bodied encounters that engaged the senses, emotions, and psyche simultaneously. The boundary between the known and unknown blurred, leaving abductees suspended in a state of perpetual tension, awake yet dreaming, aware yet confused, safe yet vulnerable. This liminal space, where the ordinary and extraordinary overlap, forms the crucible in which first contact is forged, a space the audience can inhabit vicariously, sensing both terror and fascination as the stage is set for the next phase of the narrative. For many abductees, the moment of being taken was not heralded by grand fanfare or dramatic warnings. It often arrived with a sudden, inexplicable disruption of the familiar, a shiver in the air, a pulse of light that seemed to bend reality, or a sudden weightlessness that made the body feel alien to itself. One instant, the world was ordinary. Beds, walls, rooms illuminated by mundane light. The next, the air itself seemed charged, vibrating subtly, as though the laws of physics had shifted. Mark, who had first seen the pale luminescent glow in his bedroom, described the sensation as if the floor beneath him had dissolved, leaving him suspended in a quiet void. His muscles resisted, yet his body rose, carried upward by a force both gentle and relentless. Fear and disbelief collided, making every second stretch into eternity. The sensory overload during abduction was profound. The human body, accustomed to terrestrial stimuli, found itself in environments where sight, sound, and touch were distorted. Karen recounted a moment when she felt herself lifted through a narrow corridor of shimmering light. The walls pulsed with an iridescent hue that seemed alive, and the air smelled faintly metallic, tinged with a scent that lingered on her skin long after the experience ended. She could hear a high-pitched resonance, vibrating in her skull and chest simultaneously, a sound that seemed designed to map the contours of her nervous system. There was no escape, no hiding. The body became both instrument and subject under scrutiny. Beings, when they revealed themselves, defied conventional description. Many abductees report small, thin figures with elongated limbs and disproportionately large heads, their eyes dark and unblinking, reflecting an intelligence that was immediately palpable. Jane, who had experienced strange auditory phenomena in her home, described being approached by a figure whose presence radiated both authority and curiosity. Its hands, delicate yet precise, hovered over her, tracing patterns in the air she could not see but could feel. Despite the alienness, there was a clinical detachment in their movements, as if the interactions were systematic, purposeful, and entirely methodical. Psychological effects during abduction were as intense as the physical. A common sensation was paralysis, the body rendered immobile while consciousness remained fully alert. Michael recalled lying on his bedroom floor, unable to move, while a soft, glowing light enveloped him. Panic surged through his mind, yet he could not scream or reach for any semblance of defense. Thoughts raced, blending terror with awe, disbelief with a raw certainty that he was no longer in control. Abductees often describe this combination of vulnerability and hyper-awareness as uniquely harrowing. Every sense is magnified, every detail burned into memory with unnatural clarity, while the body itself becomes a captive. Movement within alien crafts, or the spaces abductees are drawn into, added to the disorientation. These environments often defy earthly architecture, corridors bending at impossible angles, surfaces that glimmer or pulse with energy, and lighting that seems to have no source yet illuminates everything with unnatural clarity. Karen described feeling drawn through hallways that seemed alive, responsive to her presence, each step unweighted, almost dreamlike. The absence of gravity, or its altered manifestation, left a sensation of floating, swimming, or being suspended between dimensions. Even mundane motions, like reaching for a surface or turning the head, became complex, as proprioception failed to reconcile with sensory input. The abductions were rarely silent. Some abductees reported subtle hums or tones, others a chorus of mechanical or biological sounds that seemed to resonate with both the environment and the human body. Linda, who had first experienced low humming vibrations in her bedroom, described a symphony of soft pulses, clicks, and whirs during her abduction. Each sound seemed to interact with her neural pathways, creating both discomfort and strange clarity. The intensity of these auditory phenomena heightened fear and fascination simultaneously, forcing the mind to focus on every nuance while grappling with the impossibility of comprehension. Physical contact with the beings, when it occurred, was chilling yet strangely neutral. Jane recounted a sequence in which delicate appendages hovered over her body, examining her skin, limbs, and facial features with exacting precision. There was no overt aggression, but the sensation was deeply unsettling. Michael experienced an impression of invasive study, as if the aliens were mapping, scanning, or altering his consciousness in ways imperceptible yet profoundly intrusive. Some abductees reported faint electrical or tingling sensations coursing through the body, localized or spreading, often accompanied by a sense of monitoring or measurement. The combination of observation, immobility, and sensory distortion made the experiences terrifyingly vivid, leaving lasting impressions on both body and psyche. Time itself appeared to lose its meaning during abduction. Hours could pass, yet abductees often report feeling as though mere minutes had elapsed. The disorientation was compounded by environmental anomalies. Light seemed to bend, distances appeared inconsistent, and physical laws acted unpredictably. Karen recounted attempting to step across a corridor only to find her motion delayed or extended in ways that defied terrestrial logic. This temporal distortion, combined with altered gravity and alien spatial orientation, created a psychological effect akin to being caught between worlds, alert, yet powerless, aware, yet unable to reconcile experience with memory. Emotional responses varied, but were intense across the board. Fear, awe, and disbelief intertwined with curiosity, helplessness, and sometimes even fleeting comfort. Many abductees describe a paradoxical calm during certain moments, a quiet recognition that resistance was futile and that the being's intentions, though mysterious, were not overtly hostile. Yet this calm coexisted with terror, particularly at moments of heightened sensory intensity, such as exposure to bright lights, invasive scanning, or unexpected movement. The emotional layering heightened memory retention, embedding both the trauma and the surreal nature of the encounter deep into consciousness. Several abductees reported phenomena that challenged their understanding of the body itself. Some described altered perceptions of their own limbs, feeling them elongated or weightless. Others experienced intense pressure at the chest or head, often accompanied by faint, rhythmic vibrations. Jane spoke of seeing her own hands reflected in the alien light, yet the image appeared distorted, almost as if she were observing herself through a lens that did not adhere to earthly physics. These distortions reinforced the sense of alien control, emphasizing that abductees were operating in an environment fundamentally outside human comprehension. For some, medical-like examinations were part of the abduction narrative. Karen described witnessing precise, deliberate procedures, scans, monitoring, and minor invasive interventions, conducted with minimal apparent discomfort yet leaving lingering, inexplicable effects. Michael experienced a subtle, invasive touch on his arms and chest, followed by a sensation of warmth spreading from points of contact. These events were neither cruel nor explicitly harmful, yet they induced a deep sense of vulnerability, reinforcing the abductees' recognition that they were entirely at the mercy of an intelligence beyond their understanding. Despite the intensity, abductees often report an underlying structure to the abduction experience. There is a rhythm, a sequence, an almost deliberate choreography to the events. Initial capture, movement through corridors, sensory assessment, observation, and eventual return. The sequence may feel dreamlike or timeless, yet it leaves an indelible mark on memory. Each stage of the abduction imposes psychological and emotional challenges, testing the abductee's perception, comprehension, and endurance. When the abduction ends, the return is sudden and disorienting. The body may be deposited back in the familiar environment, yet nothing feels normal. Hours may have passed unaccounted for. Bruises, marks, or disorientation may remain. The mind reels, attempting to reconcile vivid sensory input with the rational expectation of reality. Mark, returning from his first encounter, lay on his bedroom floor, aware that something extraordinary had occurred, yet uncertain whether he had dreamt it or truly experienced the impossible. The body felt light, yet heavy with lingering tension. The mind felt hyper-alert yet exhausted. The transition from the abduction itself to post-event disorientation is seamless yet profound. The stark contrast between alien environments and familiar surroundings amplifies psychological impact. The ordinary room, the hum of household appliances, and the weight of gravity become uncanny, almost alien in their own right. This return often triggers lasting effects: hypervigilance, insomnia, anxiety, and obsessive contemplation of events that defy understanding. Abductees are left suspended between two realities: the mundane world they re-enter and the incomprehensible experiences they have survived. Abduction, in its totality, is a fusion of terror, wonder, and incomprehensibility. The moments of being taken are suffused with sensory intensity, emotional complexity, and the undeniable presence of an intelligence far beyond human comprehension. The experience is simultaneously intrusive and investigative, frightening and mesmerizing, fleeting in duration yet eternal in impact. By depicting these moments in rich, tangible detail, the audience is invited to inhabit the abductee's consciousness fully, experiencing the helplessness, the awe, and the horror firsthand. The aftermath of abduction is often less dramatic than the moment of being taken, yet its impact is equally profound. Unlike the vivid, undeniable intensity of first contact or the abduction itself, what follows is a subtle unraveling of perception, memory, and trust in reality. Many abductees awaken not only in familiar surroundings but also with a gnawing uncertainty. Hours, sometimes entire nights, are missing. These lapses, often accompanied by a lingering sense of unease, create a dissonance between the expected and the experienced, leaving the mind desperate for explanation. Jane, for example, recalls preparing for bed, only to awaken in the early hours of the morning with no memory of the interval. Her immediate reaction was confusion, bordering on panic, compounded by a faint metallic odor in the air and a subtle tingling sensation along her arms, residual traces of something she could not name. Missing time is a common thread in abduction narratives. Abductees often report noticing discrepancies in clocks, misplaced objects, or unexplained fatigue that cannot be accounted for by daily routines. Mark discovered an entire afternoon unaccounted for, breakfast plates left on the table, emails unanswered, and a sense of detachment from events he clearly remembered initiating. The missing hours are accompanied by fragmented memories, fleeting impressions of light, sound, or movement that refuse to cohere into a comprehensible sequence. These fragments hover at the edges of consciousness, teasing with glimpses of the extraordinary while denying closure or clarity. Dreams and visions often emerge in this liminal space between memory and reality. They are vivid, sometimes terrifying, and frequently indistinguishable from waking experience. Karen recounts nights spent traversing corridors of light, encountering figures she cannot fully describe, or floating in rooms filled with strange instruments. These dreams are not ordinary. They are immersive, complete with sensory detail, emotional intensity, and a sense of narrative progression. Often, abductees awaken with physical traces, bruises, abrasions, or lingering sensations of pressure that confirm the dreams are more than imagination. The boundaries between sleep and waking blur, leaving a persistent tension that colors daily life. Recurring nightmares are particularly common. These dreams often replicate elements of the abduction: alien figures observing or manipulating the body, corridors that defy logic, and sensations of helplessness that echo the physical immobility experienced during the encounter. The repetition of these nightmares reinforces trauma, embedding fear within subconscious and conscious thought alike. Some abductees report waking visions, in which they perceive fleeting lights, shadowy figures, or sensations of presence during ordinary activities. Linda described noticing peripheral movement in her kitchen, a shadow lingering at the edge of sight, immediately triggering memories of abduction even during daylight hours. Fragmented memories present a unique psychological challenge. Abductees struggle to piece together events, often oscillating between belief, skepticism, and self-doubt. The mind attempts to rationalize what cannot be fully understood, creating partial recollections interspersed with confusion. Jane frequently questioned her sanity, trying to reconcile missing hours with mundane routines, fearing ridicule if she shared her experiences. Similarly, Mark documented hours he could not remember, only to find himself doubting the validity of the journal entries themselves. This uncertainty amplifies anxiety and contributes to a pervasive sense of vulnerability. The ordinary becomes suspect, the familiar untrustworthy. Physical and emotional residues from abduction linger long after the events themselves. Sleep disturbances, sudden awakenings, and inexplicable aches are common. Some report heightened sensitivity to light or sound, while others experience sudden fatigue or tremors in moments reminiscent of the abduction. These physical traces intertwine with emotional impact. Fear, awe, confusion, and occasional fascination create a complex tapestry of trauma and wonder. The psychological weight is compounded by the inability to fully comprehend the experience, leaving abductees caught in a cycle of introspection and uncertainty. Repressed memories frequently resurface, often triggered by sensory cues, dreams, or external stimuli. A faint glow, an unusual sound, or a specific scent can unlock fragments of previously inaccessible experience. Karen discovered this phenomenon when revisiting the room where her first contact occurred. Subtle light patterns and spatial arrangements triggered recollections she had not consciously accessed for months. Similarly, Michael reported that the hum of machinery or the metallic scent sometimes awakened faint impressions of movement and observation, memories that he struggled to reconcile with conscious experience. These resurfacing fragments can be as disorienting as the original event, requiring abductees to navigate the blurred boundaries of perception, memory, and reality. The interplay between missing time, dreams, and repressed memories underscores the deeply psychological nature of post-abduction life. Abductees live in a state of suspended understanding, aware that extraordinary events have occurred but unable to reconstruct them fully. The mind alternates between fragments of clarity and profound uncertainty, seeking patterns, causation, or meaning where none is readily apparent. This cognitive dissonance can create hypervigilance, an acute awareness of environmental anomalies, subtle movements, or minor disruptions that may signal recurrence. Everyday life is filtered through a lens of anticipation and suspicion, as abductees struggle to reconcile the ordinary with the extraordinary. Isolation often compounds psychological strain. Many abductees are reluctant to share experiences due to fear of disbelief or social ridicule. Even when narratives are disclosed to friends, family, or professionals, they may be met with skepticism, increasing the sense of alienation. The solitary navigation of missing time and fragmented memory amplifies anxiety and may contribute to emotional withdrawal, hyperawareness, or obsessive tracking of time and environmental cues. This isolation can also intensify dreams and visions, as the subconscious works to process experiences in the absence of external validation. Yet alongside fear and confusion, many abductees report an undeniable curiosity. Fragmented memories and vivid dreams hint at something larger than immediate understanding, a reality that challenges the conventional framework of perception. Karen describes an urge to understand, to piece together glimpses of corridors, figures, and instruments that appear only in dreams or fleeting recollections. This drive for comprehension coexists with anxiety, creating a delicate balance between exploration and self-protection. Similarly, Michael documented patterns of missing time, recording dream imagery, environmental anomalies, and physical sensations, hoping that the process of observation might reveal coherence where none seemed to exist. The accumulation of fragmented memories, missing hours, and recurring dreams forms a psychological landscape that is both intricate and unnerving. Abductees navigate a world where ordinary experiences are punctuated by anomalies that cannot be ignored, where sleep offers no refuge, and where memory itself is unreliable. The interplay of consciousness and subconscious, reality and perception, fosters a heightened sensitivity to both internal and external stimuli. Abductees become attuned to nuances that others might dismiss, interpreting subtle cues as potential markers of ongoing phenomena. This landscape sets the stage for a desperate search for understanding, validation, and reconciliation. Fragmented memories, missing time, and recurring dreams create a persistent tension. The need to know what occurred, the desire to maintain connection with ordinary life, and the struggle to process experiences that defy explanation. The mind oscillates between disbelief and certainty, between fear and fascination, as abductees attempt to reconstruct events from scattered impressions. This search becomes a defining feature of post-abduction life, driving individuals toward investigation, community, or therapeutic intervention in an effort to restore coherence to fractured perception. By focusing on missing time and dreams, this section highlights the profound psychological aftermath of abduction. It bridges the immediacy of the experience with the enduring impact, creating empathy for the audience while preserving suspense. The gradual emergence of memories, their fragmentation, and the haunting recurrence of dreams immerse viewers in the abductees' lived reality, preparing them for the subsequent exploration of coping mechanisms, investigation, and long-term consequences. While the subjective experiences of abductees are vivid and emotionally charged, the question of evidence has long been central to understanding and validating these extraordinary claims. Skeptics often dismiss abduction narratives as hallucinations, dreams, or psychological phenomena. Yet, for many abductees, the events leave physical, medical, and corroborative traces that defy easy explanation, lending weight to the notion that these encounters are not purely imagined. The transition from personal recollection to tangible proof marks a critical stage in these stories, bridging the gap between anecdote and credibility. One of the most compelling forms of evidence is unexplained physical marks. Abductees frequently discover scars, punctures, or abrasions on their bodies that appear without discernible cause. These marks are often small, circular, and arranged in precise patterns, sometimes forming grids or symmetrical configurations that suggest deliberate placement. Jane described waking one morning to find a small, perfectly round indentation on her forearm. It was reddish at first, then faded to a faint, persistent mark that could not be linked to any accident, injury, or medical procedure. Michael encountered a similar phenomenon, a cluster of tiny, evenly spaced marks on his shoulder, which medical examination confirmed were not the result of known dermatological conditions. The consistency and specificity of such marks across different individuals make them difficult to dismiss as coincidence or self-inflicted. Medical anomalies provide another layer of evidence. Some abductees report temporary or permanent changes in physiological function following encounters. These can include heightened sensitivity to light or sound, altered sleep patterns, unexplained fatigue, and in some cases, changes in neurological activity detectable through diagnostic tests. Karen underwent a series of neurological scans after repeated abductions, which revealed subtle but unusual patterns of brain activity during sleep and memory recall. These patterns corresponded with periods she had identified as missing time, suggesting a physiological imprint of the experiences. Such findings, while not universally replicable, point to tangible effects that extend beyond subjective perception. Implants represent perhaps the most sensational yet verifiable form of evidence. Across multiple accounts, abductees have reported discovering small, metallic or biomechanical objects embedded beneath the skin. These devices are often microscopic, cylindrical, or disc-like, and they resist conventional analysis. In some documented cases, objects have been surgically removed and examined, revealing unusual composition, materials not commonly found in medical or industrial applications, sometimes containing isotopic ratios inconsistent with Earth-based manufacturing. Jane recounted the removal of a tiny, silver-colored device from her upper arm, which subsequent laboratory analysis confirmed had an unusual density and microstructure. The presence of such objects lends undeniable credibility to claims that the abductions involve intentional, externally controlled interventions. Corroborating sightings and experiences among multiple witnesses further bolster the evidence. In many documented cases, abductees report incidents in which friends, family members, or nearby neighbors independently observe unexplained lights, objects, or phenomena in conjunction with the abduction event. Karen's first encounter coincided with neighbors reporting a pulsating orb hovering over her property, captured in low-resolution video that, while grainy, showed movements inconsistent with conventional drones or aircraft. Michael described a group of co-workers witnessing an unusual light above the construction site during a period he later identified as missing time. These third-party observations, when verified, provide external validation for experiences that might otherwise be dismissed as hallucinations or self-delusion. Photographs and video footage have also played a critical role in substantiating abduction narratives. Though technology often struggles to capture the full scope of phenomena, many images reveal anomalies impossible to attribute to conventional sources. Grainy nighttime photographs may capture luminous orbs or streaks of light, performing movements inconsistent with aircraft, drones, or natural atmospheric events. In some instances, infrared or motion-sensitive cameras detect sudden, unexplained heat signatures or rapid transitory movements in areas otherwise devoid of physical presence. While critics argue that photography can be manipulated, consistent patterns across multiple cases lend significant weight to the cumulative body of evidence. Scientific examination of recovered materials and medical traces provides additional validation. Implanted objects, scars, and physiological anomalies often undergo rigorous analysis, revealing characteristics that defy conventional explanation. Isotopic analysis, electron microscopy, and spectrographic testing of removed implants have produced results incompatible with terrestrial manufacturing or natural biological processes. Similarly, unusual chemical residues, minor tissue alterations, or electromagnetic readings recorded at sites of reported abduction suggest that these events leave behind measurable environmental and bodily footprints. The convergence of multiple lines of evidence, physical, medical, and observational, reinforces the credibility of abductees' claims. Witness credibility is another crucial consideration. Many abductees are ordinary individuals, teachers, nurses, engineers, and construction workers, whose personal and professional lives reflect reliability, consistency, and rationality. They are not fringe believers, attention seekers, or individuals with a history of psychiatric instability. Their accounts are often corroborated by independent witnesses, medical records, and environmental measurements. The ordinary nature of the witnesses, juxtaposed with extraordinary experiences, strengthens the plausibility of abduction narratives. Their reluctance to publicize encounters for fear of ridicule further underscores the sincerity of their testimonies. In addition to physical evidence, psychological consistency across cases reinforces credibility. Patterns emerge in reports of missing time, physical examination, abduction protocols, and post-event trauma. Abductees frequently describe similar procedures: corridor-like environments, humanoid figures with elongated features, and subtle scientific interventions. The recurrence of these elements across geographically and culturally diverse cases suggests an underlying framework that is neither random nor purely imaginary. The consistency of experience, coupled with corroborating physical and environmental evidence, challenges explanations based solely on psychological phenomena. Supporting documentation, including logs, journals, and recorded observations, provides another dimension of proof. Abductees often meticulously track patterns of missing time, dreams, environmental anomalies, and sensory experiences. These records, sometimes spanning years, allow for cross-referencing with external events, such as UFO sightings or third-party observations. Jane maintained a journal of dreams, missing time, and physical sensations, noting correlations with neighborhood reports of unexplained lights. Similarly, Michael documented environmental anomalies at the construction site, linking them to periods he identified as abduction episodes. These records serve as tangible evidence that supports subjective narratives. The cumulative weight of this evidence challenges dismissal. While no single piece of proof is universally conclusive, the convergence of unexplained marks, medical anomalies, implants, corroborating sightings, photographs, and detailed witness testimony creates a compelling mosaic. Taken together, they form a robust argument that these experiences are not solely the product of imagination, dreams, or psychological distortion. The abductions leave traces in the physical world, measurable and documentable, that persist long after the immediate experience has ended. Moreover, the societal implications of such evidence are profound. Recognition of physical and corroborative traces shifts the narrative from private anecdote to a broader, investigable phenomenon. Researchers, ufologists, and medical professionals increasingly document cases with rigorous methods, incorporating scientific testing, interviews, and environmental monitoring. While skepticism remains, the growing body of credible, verifiable evidence has prompted reconsideration of previously dismissed accounts. Abduction narratives, once relegated to the realm of fringe speculation, now demand serious attention, prompting dialogue about the unknown, human vulnerability, and the limits of comprehension. Finally, the evidence underscores the deeply personal consequences of abduction. Beyond societal acknowledgement, physical marks, implants, and corroborated experiences leave a lasting imprint on the individual. They validate experiences that might otherwise be doubted internally or externally, while simultaneously reinforcing the reality of intrusion, observation, and investigation by an intelligence beyond comprehension. For abductees, proof is both confirmation and burden, a tangible reminder that ordinary life has been penetrated by extraordinary forces. By weaving together physical, medical, and corroborative evidence, this section establishes that abductions are more than stories. They are phenomena leaving measurable, often verifiable traces. These details enhance credibility, engage the audience, and prepare for exploration of the broader consequences of abduction on personal and societal levels, linking naturally to the next section on the psychological and social impact. Returning from an abduction is not simply a matter of stepping back into ordinary life. For many abductees, the experience leaves an indelible imprint on every aspect of existence, reshaping perception, behavior, and relationships in subtle and sometimes profound ways. The immediate disorientation and fear of post-abduction periods evolve into long-term consequences that are psychological, emotional, and social. Survivors often describe an enduring sense that the world has shifted, a quiet tension beneath everyday routines that persists long after the initial experience. Emotional trauma is perhaps the most immediate and pervasive consequence. Fear, anxiety, and hypervigilance often linger for years, manifesting as heightened alertness to environmental anomalies, difficulty sleeping, or recurring panic during seemingly innocuous events. Karen described waking in the middle of the night, heart pounding, sensing the presence of unseen entities even when none were visible. The emotional imprint of the abduction can become intertwined with ordinary life, coloring perceptions and reactions in ways that are both subtle and disruptive. Simple household noises, changes in lighting, or unexplained shadows may trigger memories or sensations from the original encounter, creating a persistent undercurrent of tension. Post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, is commonly reported among abductees, mirroring the psychological patterns observed in survivors of other extreme events. Flashbacks, intrusive thoughts, nightmares, and avoidance behaviors are frequent, often triggered by sensory reminders or periods of solitude. Jane recounted a recurring nightmare in which corridors of light, humanoid figures, and sensations of immobility replayed the trauma of her abduction. Even during waking hours, she experienced sudden waves of anxiety, heightened heart rate, and involuntary physical responses linked to memories of the encounter. The persistence of these symptoms underscores that the impact of abduction extends far beyond the initial event, affecting mental health and daily functioning in tangible ways. Abduction experiences also catalyze shifts in belief systems and worldview. Individuals who once held strictly materialistic or conventional perspectives often find themselves reconsidering the nature of reality, consciousness, and the universe. Michael, previously a staunch skeptic of extraterrestrial life, found that his abduction shattered prior assumptions, prompting him to explore questions of cosmic intelligence, interdimensional realities, and the limitations of human perception. This transformation can be both enlightening and isolating, as the abductee grapples with knowledge that is difficult to communicate or validate, often diverging from societal norms or scientific consensus. Relationships frequently bear the weight of abduction experiences. Trust and intimacy may be challenged as individuals struggle to convey encounters to family, friends, or partners. Fear of disbelief or ridicule can lead to withdrawal or selective disclosure, creating emotional distance. Karen described hesitating to share the details of her encounters with her spouse for fear of skepticism, ultimately leading to strained communication and moments of isolation within her own household. Conversely, some relationships strengthen as abductees connect with like-minded individuals or supportive communities, forming bonds with others who share or validate their experiences. These dynamics highlight the profound social repercussions of encounters, influencing both personal and communal interactions. Careers and professional lives can be subtly affected as well. Abductees may experience difficulty concentrating, heightened fatigue, or intermittent anxiety that impacts performance. Some change careers entirely, seeking environments that allow for introspection, flexibility, or exploration of their experiences. Others maintain professional routines but incorporate coping mechanisms, such as journaling, meditation, or engagement with research into anomalous phenomena. The long-term impact on vocational trajectories underscores that abduction experiences permeate all facets of life, extending beyond the immediate psychological and emotional realm into practical, everyday realities. Coping strategies among abductees vary widely. Many seek therapy, often specializing in trauma, dissociation, or sleep disturbances. Others turn to personal exploration, meditation, or participation in support groups, which provide validation and shared understanding. Jane combined clinical therapy with detailed journaling, documenting missing time, dreams, and environmental anomalies to reconstruct patterns and regain a sense of agency. Michael found solace in active investigation, researching historical and contemporary cases, cross-referencing sightings, and comparing experiences with other abductees. These strategies illustrate a dynamic process of coping, blending rational analysis with personal reflection and emotional processing. Interestingly, some abductees report heightened intuition or sensory awareness following encounters. Subtle changes in perception, an acute awareness of shifts in light, sound, or energy, are described as an unexpected consequence of their experiences. Karen noticed an ability to detect anomalies in her environment with uncanny accuracy, sometimes anticipating changes or disturbances before they occurred. Michael experienced increased sensitivity to electrical devices and spatial awareness, which he attributes to prolonged exposure to phenomena during abduction. These heightened abilities, though not universally reported, suggest that the encounters may alter cognitive and sensory processing in ways that persist beyond the immediate experience. The long-term consequences also include profound existential questioning. Survivors frequently confront questions of purpose, the nature of consciousness, and the potential motivations of the entities involved. The ambiguity of abduction, simultaneously threatening, invasive, and investigative, leaves abductees in a state of continual reflection. Why them? What do the beings want? Are these interventions benign, experimental, or ultimately unknowable? These questions often drive a lifelong engagement with both personal and collective mysteries, shaping intellectual curiosity and philosophical exploration. Health effects can accompany psychological consequences. Some abductees experience unexplained fatigue, minor but persistent physical anomalies, or sensitivity to environmental factors. Jane reported intermittent dizziness and tension headaches that appeared in alignment with triggers reminiscent of abduction periods. Others notice minor but curious physiological changes, such as small scars or temporary sensory fluctuations, that act as ongoing reminders of the encounters. While not universally debilitating, these manifestations reinforce the reality and persistence of the abduction experience. Communities of abductees often provide validation and shared understanding, mitigating isolation and skepticism. Forums, research groups, and support networks allow survivors to exchange experiences, discuss evidence, and compare symptoms. Karen found reassurance in a local support group, realizing that recurring dreams, missing time, and physical sensations were not unique to her, but part of a broader phenomenon. This communal aspect reinforces the credibility of experiences while providing emotional and social support. Despite the challenges, many abductees integrate their experiences into meaningful personal narratives. The trauma, disorientation, and fear coexist with newfound curiosity, heightened perception, and philosophical questioning. Life after abduction becomes a delicate balance between managing ongoing symptoms, exploring the unknown, and finding purpose in experiences that defy conventional understanding. Michael described his journey as learning to live in two worlds simultaneously, one ordinary and terrestrial, the other extraordinary, cosmic, and largely invisible. These long-term consequences highlight the deeply personal and societal dimensions of abduction. Individually, survivors contend with trauma, disorientation, altered perception, and heightened introspection. Socially, they navigate skepticism, altered relationships, and the challenges of articulating experiences that may defy comprehension. The persistence of physical, emotional, and cognitive effects underscores that abduction is not a singular event but a transformative experience that reshapes identity, perception, and life trajectory. Ultimately, life after abduction is a complex interplay of trauma, adaptation, and continued inquiry. Survivors face enduring psychological effects, shifts in belief systems, relational challenges, vocational impacts, and subtle sensory or cognitive changes. Yet within this complexity lies resilience. Abductees seek understanding, validate experiences through community and evidence, and often develop heightened awareness or insight that becomes integrated into daily life. The consequences of abduction extend far beyond the immediate encounter, leaving an enduring imprint on consciousness and personal narrative. By examining these long-term effects, the audience gains an understanding of both the personal cost and the adaptive responses to extraordinary experiences. The narrative transitions naturally from individual aftermath to wider implications, setting the stage for exploration of societal, philosophical, and theoretical frameworks that attempt to contextualize abduction phenomena. The question of what governments know about alien abductions hovers over nearly every serious discussion of these events. For decades, abductees, researchers, and the public have speculated about hidden files, clandestine programs, and intelligence operations designed not to reveal the truth but to suppress it. This undercurrent of secrecy is more than a plot device in science fiction. It is an element repeatedly raised in witness accounts, declassified documents, and whistleblower testimony. For many who have endured the strange and traumatic experience of abduction, the idea that powerful agencies are aware, perhaps even complicit, deepens both the mystery and the unease. Patterns of government involvement often begin subtly. Individuals who report abductions sometimes describe unexpected visits, phone calls, or inquiries from officials whose presence seems difficult to explain. Karen, after publicizing her first account, received a letter on official-looking stationery warning her against further dissemination of falsehoods that could disrupt public order. When she called the number listed, it had been disconnected. Michael recalled seeing unmarked vehicles parked near his home for weeks after he spoke at a conference about his experiences, with men in dark clothing observing from inside. These incidents might be dismissed as paranoia were it not for their recurrence across numerous testimonies, echoing similar tactics described by unrelated witnesses. Leaked documents and declassified files reinforce suspicions of a hidden agenda. Over the past several decades, releases under the Freedom of Information Act (FOIA) have revealed extensive government interest in unidentified aerial phenomena, UAPs, and unexplained encounters. Project Blue Book, long cited as a primary example, officially closed in 1969, yet even its heavily redacted records indicate a persistent and serious investigation into unexplained sightings. Later disclosures, such as the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, ATIP, suggest that interest did not end but evolved, moving into even more classified domains. Documents referencing non-human biological entities or materials of unknown origin have been reported, though often accompanied by heavy redactions that obscure critical details. These partial glimpses into official files create a tantalizing but incomplete picture, suggesting that the story is larger and more complex than the public has been allowed to see. Whistleblower claims add a human voice to these mysteries. Former intelligence officers, contractors, and military personnel have occasionally stepped forward to describe programs designed to monitor abductees, recover materials, or study the physiological and psychological effects of close encounters. One former Air Force technician, speaking under a pseudonym, described a covert unit tasked with cataloging anomalous implants recovered from civilians. According to his account, these items were analyzed in secure laboratories alongside materials retrieved from unidentified craft. Another whistleblower, once employed in an intelligence analysis role, claimed that abductees were often placed on watch lists, their communications monitored for patterns, and their medical records quietly copied. While these statements are difficult to verify, they resonate with the fears and experiences of many who believe they have been targeted or silenced after reporting encounters. The secrecy is not merely about information but about power, the control of narrative, perception, and ultimately reality. Governments, by virtue of their resources and reach, have the ability to shape public understanding of extraordinary phenomena. By framing abduction accounts as delusions or hoaxes while simultaneously studying them in secret, agencies create a dual reality, one for public consumption and another for internal investigation. This split fosters confusion and disbelief, making it easier to dismiss witnesses even as their experiences are quietly catalogued and analyzed. Technological surveillance further feeds suspicions. Abductees sometimes report strange interference with phones, computers, or household electronics following public disclosure of their stories. Karen described her laptop webcam activating on its own, its small green light flickering at odd hours, while Michael noticed his emails about abduction research disappearing from his sent folder without explanation. These anecdotes dovetail with broader revelations about government surveillance capabilities, making it plausible, if not provable, that individuals discussing sensitive or extraordinary topics might be monitored. Historical parallels strengthen the sense of possibility. From the Manhattan Project to MKUltra, governments have repeatedly demonstrated the ability to conceal large-scale, ethically dubious programs from the public for years, even decades. In this context, the idea of a hidden initiative to study or manage alien contact no longer seems implausible but consistent with established patterns of secrecy. Whistleblowers often invoke these precedents, arguing that disclosure will not come voluntarily, but only through sustained public pressure or unexpected leaks. The question then arises, why would governments hide such information? Several motives are frequently suggested. Some argue that disclosure would destabilize societal structures, undermining religion, politics, and the economy by shattering assumptions about humanity's place in the universe. Others posit that secrecy protects proprietary technology or strategic advantage derived from recovered materials or knowledge. A darker possibility is that agreements, explicit or tacit, exist between governments and non-human entities, involving exchanges of information, resources, or even biological material. While evidence for such claims remains circumstantial, their persistence across decades and cultures suggests they tap into something more than idle speculation. For abductees, the possibility of government involvement adds a new dimension to their trauma. The experience of being taken is already disorienting. The suspicion that one's own government may know and remain silent, or worse, be complicit, compounds feelings of vulnerability and betrayal. Karen expressed this sentiment with quiet bitterness. It's one thing to be at the mercy of something you can't understand. It's another to think people who could help are choosing not to. This sense of abandonment deepens the psychological toll and reinforces the isolating nature of the experience. Researchers who attempt to investigate these intersections between abduction and government secrecy often find themselves facing subtle obstacles. FOIA requests are delayed, denied, or heavily redacted. Witnesses recant under pressure or vanish from public view. Funding for independent studies dries up. Even mainstream journalists have encountered resistance when pursuing these topics, finding sources unwilling to speak on record or discovering that corroborating documents have inexplicably disappeared. These patterns, while not proof, create an environment of opacity that is difficult to ignore. The presence of military or intelligence personnel near reported abduction sites also raises questions. Some abductees describe helicopters circling their homes after encounters, unmarked vehicles parked nearby, or men in uniform appearing under ambiguous pretenses. Michael reported seeing a black SUV idling outside his workplace the morning after he spoke publicly about his implant removal, its occupants scanning the area with handheld devices. While such incidents may be coincidences or misinterpretations, their recurrence across geographically disparate cases suggests a coordinated pattern. Leaked footage and anonymous briefings have occasionally brought these suspicions into sharper focus. Video purportedly showing the retrieval of unknown craft or the transport of anomalous biological samples has surfaced online, often dismissed as hoaxes but sometimes corroborated by multiple independent sources. In one case, declassified military logs confirmed the presence of aircraft in restricted airspace during a widely reported UFO sighting, matching the timeline described by civilian witnesses. These glimpses, though fragmentary, hint at a larger mosaic of clandestine activity. Even more unsettling are claims of direct monitoring of abductees themselves. Several individuals have reported being approached by consultants or researchers claiming to offer help, only to later discover their affiliations with government or private contractors. These interactions blur the line between support and surveillance, leaving abductees uncertain of whom to trust. Jane recounted meeting a therapist recommended by a mutual contact, only to later discover that the clinic received funding from a defense-related research program studying anomalous cognition. Such revelations reinforce fears of being treated as subjects rather than survivors. This climate of secrecy, surveillance, and selective disclosure shapes how abductees interpret their own experiences. Some view the government as complicit, others as powerless but informed, still others as actively engaged in damage control. Whatever the interpretation, the presence of an unseen, powerful entity observing from the margins mirrors the abduction experience itself. Unseen, unacknowledged, but undeniably present. This parallel deepens the narrative tension, drawing abductees and researchers alike into a labyrinth of mystery where truth and manipulation intertwine. And yet, within this maze, personal testimonies remain a constant. While documents can be redacted and programs hidden, the voices of abductees continue to emerge, telling stories that converge across time, culture, and geography. These accounts, when juxtaposed with hints of official knowledge or intervention, reinforce the sense that something extraordinary is occurring, something both deeply personal and broadly systemic. In this way, the secrecy does not silence the phenomenon but amplifies it, compelling those who have experienced it to speak, even at personal risk. By following this thread of hidden agendas and government secrets, the narrative naturally leads to the individuals whose stories defy suppression. The external world of classified files, surveillance, and covert programs intersects with the internal world of abductees' lived experience, each reflecting and validating the other. It is here, at this junction of personal testimony and systemic secrecy, that the story moves from speculation to a deeper exploration of reality, a shift that sets the stage for the next layer of encounters and the growing body of testimonies that refuse to fade. The encounters that challenge explanation are the ones that leave the deepest mark, not just on the individuals involved, but on those who hear their stories. While missing time, fragmented memories, and fleeting lights capture attention, certain cases stand out because of their extraordinary clarity, multiple witnesses, and repeated phenomena. These are the narratives that transcend skepticism, compelling researchers, journalists, and ordinary observers alike to pause and consider the reality of what has occurred. One of the most compelling aspects of these encounters is the presence of multiple witnesses. Abductions that unfold in public spaces, or at least in the presence of more than one observer, offer a level of corroboration that is difficult to dismiss. Karen's experience, for example, involved not only her but two neighbors who independently reported seeing an orb of light hovering over her property late at night. While Karen described a sensation of being pulled upward, enveloped in a bright, humming light, the neighbors each provided separate accounts of the same phenomena, observing it from different vantage points. These converging testimonies created a complex picture. The abduction was not only a personal experience, but a shared event observable in the physical world, documented, and remembered in vivid detail by multiple individuals. Repeated experiences over years also contribute to the credibility and intrigue of certain cases. Abductees often report encounters occurring at intervals, sometimes months or even years apart, with patterns and procedures that bear striking similarities. Michael, for instance, described being taken multiple times over a decade. Each encounter followed a similar sequence: an initial sensation of being immobilized, a transfer into an unfamiliar corridor or chamber illuminated by soft, pulsating light, and the presence of beings with elongated features and large, dark eyes. The recurrence of these patterns, coupled with physical marks and implants that appeared in tandem with each episode, suggested that these were not random hallucinations, but events with an underlying consistency. Interactions with groups of beings add another layer of complexity. In several cases, abductees report not merely observing entities, but engaging with them in ways that suggest intelligence, intention, and communication. Karen described a moment in which a group of 4 beings surrounded her, their attention focused yet unthreatening. They examined her, gesturing in ways that conveyed curiosity and instruction rather than hostility. Michael encountered a group during one abduction in which the beings seemed to coordinate movements, adjusting instruments and lighting in a deliberate sequence that conveyed organization and purpose. These interactions defy simple explanation, challenging the notion that encounters are the result of sleep paralysis, fantasy, or psychosis. The beings act in ways that are coordinated, intelligent, and responsive to the abductees themselves. Public or semi-public encounters further complicate skepticism. In some instances, abductions or sightings occur in spaces where other people can witness aspects of the event, even if they do not perceive the entire phenomenon. Jane recounted an incident in which she felt the familiar pull of an unseen force while walking across her backyard. Though she experienced the abduction fully, her neighbor saw a sudden flash of light and an object hovering briefly above the yard before disappearing. This simultaneous perception by both abductee and observer provides a bridge between subjective experience and external validation, making the narrative difficult to reduce to hallucination or fabrication. Sensory detail is central to the most compelling cases. Abductees describe encounters that are richly textured, the metallic scent of the air, the tactile sensation of surfaces that are smooth yet strangely warm or cold, and sounds that defy conventional categorization, from high-frequency hums to low, resonant tones that seem to vibrate through the body. Karen described a particular chamber where the walls pulsed with light, and a low hum seemed synchronized to her own heartbeat. Michael recalled the sensation of movement without motion, as if his body were transported through space instantaneously. These vivid details provide a sense of veracity, as the experiences are consistent across multiple witnesses and repeated encounters. Temporal anomalies often accompany dramatic abductions, challenging the abductee's perception of time. Missing hours or even days are not unusual, but some encounters involve simultaneous perception of multiple timelines or overlapping events. Jane described a moment in which she perceived herself both in her bedroom and within the chamber of the abduction simultaneously, as if consciousness had been divided. Observers outside the home, however, reported seeing her remain physically present while an orb of light hovered above her body, creating a paradoxical overlay of internal and external experience. These temporal distortions are reported by numerous abductees, suggesting that the phenomenon operates on a level beyond conventional human understanding of space and time. Longitudinal documentation further strengthens these accounts. Many abductees maintain detailed records of their experiences, tracking environmental anomalies, physiological changes, and the recurrence of specific patterns. Michael kept a journal for over a decade, noting the precise time of each episode, the behaviors of the beings, and any physical or mental effects afterward. By cross-referencing with independent observations, such as UFO sightings or unexplained atmospheric anomalies, he identified correlations that reinforced the reality of his experiences. These longitudinal studies provide a continuous, verifiable narrative that resists simplistic dismissal. Physical evidence often accompanies these high-profile encounters. Unexplained scars, microimplants, and temporary physiological anomalies appear in parallel with repeated abductions. Jane discovered a series of small, circular scars that appeared after each encounter, while Michael noted subtle changes in vision and auditory sensitivity that coincided with episodes. In some cases, external observers documented anomalies such as lights, shadows, or electronic interference at the same times. The convergence of subjective experience, physical change, and third-party observation creates a multidimensional form of evidence that is difficult to disregard. Emotional and psychological impacts are amplified in these cases. Abductees frequently describe a complex interplay of fear, awe, and curiosity. The encounters are rarely simplistic. They are intense, immersive, and often transformative. Karen spoke of an initial terror at the immobility and unfamiliar surroundings, followed by a profound sense of being observed and studied. Michael experienced a lingering curiosity that drove him to research and engage with others who had similar experiences. The emotional resonance of these encounters underscores their authenticity. The responses are coherent with extraordinary stimuli and persist across time, suggesting a depth that cannot be fabricated. Group phenomena also reinforce the challenge to skepticism. Abductions occurring in locations where multiple witnesses experience aspects of the event, or where multiple abductees share remarkably similar narratives, suggest an organized pattern. For example, Karen and several neighbors independently documented lights and sounds that coincided with her abduction, while Michael discovered a pattern of repeated encounters among individuals living within a 10-mile radius of each other. These converging stories highlight consistency that defies coincidence, indicating that abduction is not an isolated phenomenon but a wider, systematic event impacting multiple individuals simultaneously. Cultural and geographical consistency adds yet another layer of intrigue. Abduction narratives from diverse locations share common motifs: humanoid beings with elongated limbs and large eyes, examination procedures, telepathic communication, and the sensation of missing time. Despite differences in language, culture, and personal history, these recurring elements suggest a phenomenon with a reproducible pattern that transcends personal imagination. The regularity across continents, decades, and communities strengthens the argument that these encounters are not merely culturally influenced dreams or folklore, but phenomena with an identifiable core structure. Long-term observations often reveal evolving sophistication in the encounters themselves. Abductees who have experienced multiple episodes over years report increasing complexity in the phenomena. Beings appear to adapt to the abductees' responses, environments become more elaborate, and interactions acquire a subtle intelligence that suggests ongoing observation or experimentation. Karen noticed that during later encounters, the beings seemed to anticipate her reactions, adjusting their approach to minimize distress while maintaining control. Michael observed an evolving pattern of technological instrumentation, seemingly designed to interact with his body and mind in increasingly precise ways. This evolving complexity is a hallmark of the encounters that defy explanation, indicating that they operate according to an intelligence capable of observation, adaptation, and long-term planning. The persistence of abductees' stories, corroborated by multiple witnesses, physical evidence, and sensory detail, makes these encounters difficult to dismiss. They challenge conventional frameworks of reality, demanding that observers consider possibilities beyond immediate perception or existing scientific paradigms. While some aspects remain inexplicable, the convergence of repeated experience, documentation, and corroboration establishes a compelling case for taking these narratives seriously. In sum, the encounters that defy explanation combine multiple strands: repeated experience, coordinated interactions with groups of beings, corroboration by independent witnesses, public or semi-public settings, rich sensory detail, temporal anomalies, and consistent long-term documentation. The intensity, coherence, and verifiability of these narratives make them among the most challenging to ignore or rationalize away. These stories occupy the intersection of personal testimony, physical evidence, and societal curiosity, creating a space where skepticism is tested and the extraordinary becomes undeniable. From these dramatic, multifaceted encounters emerges a natural transition to what abductees truly remember: the core experiences and messages they carry with them, often subtle yet profound. While the physical and observable aspects may capture attention, it is the personal recollection, the psychological imprint, and the messages derived from these events that ultimately define the significance of the phenomenon. The stage is thus set to explore not just what happened, but what these encounters mean to those who live through them. For many abductees, the most enduring element of their encounters is not the missing time, the physical marks, or the terrifying isolation. It is the messages they carry back with them. These communications, often subtle, enigmatic, and sometimes terrifying, emerge not in spoken language but through visions, telepathy, or emotional resonance. They leave a lasting imprint, shaping the way abductees perceive themselves, humanity, and the universe at large. One recurring motif among abductees is the sense of warnings. Karen described an overwhelming impression of urgency, as though the beings were attempting to convey information about human behavior, technology, or the environment. These impressions were not always concrete in the sense of instructions or directives, but were instead vivid emotional currents: fear, caution, and an insistence on attention. Michael experienced similar sensations. During one encounter, he felt waves of emotion coursing through him, an almost tangible plea for humanity to reconsider its path. The warnings often touch on ecological degradation, the misuse of technological power, and the potential consequences of ignoring patterns that extend beyond immediate human perception. These messages are conveyed with such intensity that they linger long after the encounter, influencing abductees' thoughts, priorities, and actions. Telepathic communication is another common theme. Abductees frequently report understanding ideas, concepts, or instructions without hearing a word. In Karen's case, she described receiving sequences of images, symbols, natural landscapes, and events unfolding that conveyed a sense of interconnectedness and impending change. The impressions were not accompanied by voice or sound, yet they were unmistakable, forming a clear narrative in her mind. Michael, too, recalled being filled with understanding during repeated encounters, grasping the structural organization and intentions of the beings without traditional language. These experiences suggest that the purpose of communication may not be linguistic but cognitive or emotional, transcending human methods of expression. Encounters sometimes include visions of the future, fragmentary but profoundly affecting. Jane reported a series of dreams during which she witnessed events that felt as though they were unfolding centuries ahead. Shifting landscapes, technological marvels intertwined with ecological collapse, and societies grappling with moral dilemmas on a global scale. The visions were often unsettling, but they carried an implicit imperative: to act, to change, to recognize the consequences of choices made today. The abductees describe these glimpses not as prophecy in the religious sense, but as insights into potential pathways, warning of hazards that extend beyond the ordinary human time frame. Reflections on consciousness and the nature of life are also prominent in abductees' recollections. Many report an acute awareness of interconnectedness, a sense that all life is part of a larger, intelligent framework. Karen described the beings as conveying, through presence, touch, and vision, that individual actions ripple across this larger system. Michael experienced an overwhelming sense that perception itself is fluid, that consciousness can extend beyond the physical body and perhaps even across dimensions or timelines. These revelations, subtle yet profound, suggest that the encounters are not solely observational but instructive, offering perspectives intended to expand human understanding. Humanity's relationship with technology frequently emerges as a topic in these memories. Abductees often report receiving impressions of caution regarding the unchecked development of tools, machines, and artificial intelligence. Michael's visions included images of sprawling networks of devices, glowing circuits, and machines interacting in ways that seemed autonomous, accompanied by a sensation of imbalance and potential danger. Karen recalled receiving an impression of harmony between natural systems and human invention, implying that failure to achieve balance could carry consequences extending beyond Earth. These messages, interpreted over time, lead many abductees to advocate for mindfulness, ethical development, and careful stewardship of technology. Emotional and moral dimensions are also emphasized in the recollections. Abductees frequently report a sense of being tested or observed, not in judgment but in evaluation of humanity's choices. Jane experienced an almost parental warmth from the beings, coupled with a quiet, insistent awareness of responsibility. Karen described a sensation akin to being shown both the fragility and potential of humanity simultaneously, an experiential lesson conveyed without words but deeply understood. These impressions often provoke profound introspection, leading abductees to re-evaluate their relationships, priorities, and approach to daily life. Some messages appear intentionally cryptic, encoded in symbolism or repeated imagery. Karen frequently saw patterns of light, geometric shapes, spirals, and grids, during encounters, which she later interpreted as visual representations of interconnected systems, both cosmic and terrestrial. Michael received sequences of natural imagery, rivers, forests, mountains, that seemed to encode principles of balance, sustainability, and resilience. While these symbols are not immediately translatable into human language, they carry emotional clarity, suggesting that understanding may arise through reflection and intuition rather than conventional interpretation. The profound nature of these messages often leads abductees to engage in personal and societal transformation. For Karen, the visions and telepathic communications prompted a re-evaluation of her career, guiding her toward ecological advocacy and education. Michael became increasingly involved in documenting experiences, participating in research, and connecting with others who had encountered similar phenomena. These responses indicate that the encounters are not purely passive or traumatic. They are catalytic, motivating abductees to integrate insights into their lives and to act in accordance with perceived imperatives. Shared themes emerge across independent testimonies, strengthening the argument that these messages are not purely subjective. Warnings about environmental degradation, insights into consciousness, the importance of ethical behavior, and awareness of potential futures recur across cultures and decades. Despite variations in detail, the underlying currents of caution, connection, and awareness remain consistent, suggesting that abductees are accessing a common source of information or experiencing a structured intervention. These repeated motifs, when considered collectively, elevate the encounters from isolated incidents to a broader phenomenon with potential implications for humanity as a whole. Physical sensations often accompany these communications. Many abductees report feeling warmth, vibration, or energy flowing through their bodies during telepathic or symbolic messages. Karen described a sensation of currents traveling along her spine, coinciding with visual sequences in the chamber. Michael felt an inner resonance, as though a frequency within him was aligning with an external intelligence. These somatic experiences reinforce the reality of the messages, linking cognition, emotion, and physiology in a way that underscores the depth and intensity of the encounters. Long-term memory consolidation often involves reinterpretation. Abductees frequently reflect on experiences years after the fact, uncovering meanings that were not apparent initially. Jane found that recurring dreams, initially frightening, gradually revealed patterns of moral, technological, and environmental guidance. Karen realized that seemingly abstract sequences of light and sound contained a layered structure conveying principles of balance, interconnectedness, and caution. This gradual understanding highlights the cumulative and educational dimension of the encounters, demonstrating that the memories are not static but evolving, revealing insights over time. Abductees often emphasize the importance of sharing these messages with others, even when faced with skepticism or disbelief. While not all communicate publicly, those who do report that conveying insights about environmental responsibility, technological caution, and conscious living is a moral imperative. Michael's lectures and writings focus on translating the core messages into actionable reflections for the audience. Awareness of human impact, the potential for personal and collective growth, and the responsibility inherent in consciousness itself. Karen's workshops and discussions stress attentiveness to the natural world, ethical innovation, and personal integrity. These efforts suggest that the purpose of the memories extends beyond individual experience, carrying an implicit call to action for humanity. The intensity of these recollections is compounded by their coexistence with the more terrifying aspects of abduction. Memories of restraint, examination, and sensory intrusion remain vivid alongside insights, creating a duality of fear and revelation. Abductees navigate a complex emotional landscape, in which the trauma of intrusion is inseparable from the guidance and warnings perceived. This tension heightens the weight and authenticity of the memories, as they encompass both raw survival and profound instruction. Ultimately, the messages carried by abductees form a bridge between the incomprehensible and the human. They challenge individuals to think beyond immediate perception, to integrate insights about consciousness, ethics, and environmental stewardship into daily life. They compel reflection on human responsibility, the fragility of ecosystems, and the potential consequences of choices that extend far beyond the personal. By listening to these recollections, audiences are invited to consider not only the reality of the abduction phenomena, but also the larger questions they raise about humanity's place in the universe. These profound revelations naturally prepare the narrative for closure, as the final section draws together the cumulative experiences, the evidence, the warnings, and the enduring mystery of abduction. The audience is left reflecting on the implications, not only of what has been experienced but of what is still unknown, and what responsibility humans bear in a world where contact with the extraordinary may already be occurring. Reflecting on the stories presented throughout this exploration, one cannot help but be struck by the sheer consistency and depth of the experiences described by abductees. From the quiet moments preceding the first signs of the extraordinary to the messages carried back from the beyond, the phenomenon unfolds as a tapestry of human experience, interwoven with mystery, fear, awe, and revelation. Each encounter, each witness, and each piece of evidence contributes to a broader narrative that is difficult, if not impossible, to dismiss. The ordinary lives that existed before the abductions understood the universality of the phenomenon. These were people like Karen, Michael, and Jane, individuals with families, jobs, routines, and familiar surroundings. Their days were filled with ordinary concerns, household chores, workplace responsibilities, social interactions, and the predictable rhythms of daily life. It is precisely this ordinariness that makes the disruptions all the more jarring. The introduction of strange lights, missing time, and subtle distortions in perception transformed familiar environments into stages for the inexplicable. The juxtaposition of normal life with moments of extraordinary intrusion emphasizes that abductees are not exceptional in their lifestyles or character. Rather, they were ordinary individuals whose lives intersected with something extraordinary, something that reaches beyond conventional understanding. When first contact occurs, the experience is often disorienting, eliciting fear and disbelief. Lights appear in the sky, unidentifiable sounds echo in bedrooms, and a sense of presence is felt where no one else exists. These early encounters, subtle yet profound, initiate a cascade of experiences that challenge the abductee's grasp on reality. Over time, the phenomenon escalates in intensity, leading to full abduction experiences marked by immobilization, sensory overload, and interaction with beings whose appearance, behavior, and intelligence defy conventional categorization. The abduction itself, the moment of being taken, combines terror, fascination, and helplessness in ways that leave an indelible mark on both body and mind. Physical and psychological impacts persist long after the initial encounters. Abductees report scars, implants, and changes in sensory perception that accompany long-term psychological effects such as PTSD, anxiety, and hypervigilance. The experience shapes relationships, careers, and personal belief systems, compelling individuals to reassess priorities and reevaluate their understanding of reality. Emotional trauma is intertwined with profound insight, creating a duality in which fear and curiosity coexist. Many abductees describe increased intuition, heightened perception, or a sense of connection to larger cosmic systems, suggesting that these encounters are as instructive as they are invasive. The long-term consequences reveal that abduction is not a singular event but a transformative phenomenon, one that extends its influence into the core of identity and consciousness. Compelling evidence amplifies the credibility of these accounts. Multiple witnesses, corroborating photographs and videos, unexplained physical anomalies, and patterns observed across independent cases reinforce the argument that these experiences are more than mere imagination or misperception. When several individuals independently observe similar phenomena, or when repeated experiences display consistent sequences and behaviors, the probability of coincidence diminishes. Abductees' meticulous documentation, combined with reports of environmental anomalies and temporal distortions, provides a multidimensional record that demands consideration. These converging lines of evidence create a narrative that is coherent, persistent, and increasingly difficult to dismiss. The involvement of governments and intelligence agencies adds a layer of intrigue that cannot be ignored. Leaked documents, whistleblower testimony, and historical precedent indicate a sustained interest in unidentified phenomena, hinting at programs designed to monitor, study, or even influence encounters. The presence of surveillance, the appearance of unexplained observers, and the redaction of relevant files suggest that there is more happening behind the scenes than the public record reveals. This intersection of personal experience with institutional secrecy reinforces the reality of the phenomenon, underscoring the possibility that abductees are not isolated, that these events are part of a broader, complex system extending beyond individual perception. The encounters that defy explanation, those with multiple witnesses, public or semi-public settings, and repeated occurrences, emphasize the extraordinary nature of the phenomenon. These are not fleeting shadows or imagined intrusions. They are sustained, structured events that display intelligence, purpose, and interaction. Groups of beings coordinate behaviors, manipulate environments, and communicate through telepathy or symbolic imagery, creating experiences that are immersive and coherent. Temporal anomalies, missing hours, and recurring visions underscore the extraordinary character of these encounters, challenging existing paradigms of time, space, and consciousness. They demand attention precisely because they occur in ways that are consistent, verifiable, and resistant to conventional rationalization. Central to the meaning of these experiences are the messages abductees carry with them. Warnings about environmental degradation, ethical considerations in the use of technology, and reflections on human consciousness and interconnectedness recur across cases. These communications, often conveyed through telepathy, imagery, and emotion rather than speech, are instructive and urgent. They leave abductees with a sense of responsibility, a mandate to act, and a broader awareness of the consequences of human choices. The coexistence of fear and revelation in these messages reflects the dual nature of abduction. It is simultaneously traumatic and enlightening, deeply personal yet universally significant. The integration of these insights into daily life is a crucial aspect of the phenomenon. Abductees frequently channel the experiences into meaningful action, whether through ecological advocacy, technological caution, research, or education. Karen's work in environmental conservation, Michael's documentation and analysis of patterns, and Jane's reflective teaching illustrate how profound encounters can inspire tangible, long-term engagement with the world. These responses reveal that the phenomenon is not purely disruptive. It has the capacity to catalyze awareness, reflection, and positive change. Skepticism, while understandable, is challenged by the convergence of multiple strands of evidence: eyewitness accounts, recurring patterns, corroborating physical evidence, physiological impacts, and psychological consistency. When ordinary individuals experience extraordinary events under similar conditions, when multiple witnesses independently report consistent phenomena, and when physical changes accompany these experiences, it becomes increasingly untenable to dismiss them as illusion or fabrication. The cumulative weight of these factors lends credibility to the abductees' narratives, demanding a careful, open-minded consideration from both the public and scientific communities. The lingering suspense that accompanies these stories is both a feature and a purpose. Abduction narratives resist tidy explanations, existing at the intersection of observable reality and profound mystery. Viewers are left with questions that cannot be easily answered. Who are the beings? What is their ultimate purpose? How much do governments know, and how much remains hidden? Could these experiences be happening even now, in homes and neighborhoods across the world? These open-ended questions provoke contemplation, engagement, and reflection, compelling audiences to consider their own assumptions about reality. Importantly, the stories encourage participation and dialogue. Viewers are invited to share experiences, explore research, and remain attentive to unexplained phenomena in their own lives. The narratives act as both warning and invitation, a reminder that the extraordinary may intersect with the ordinary at any moment. By engaging with these accounts, individuals become part of a broader investigation into the unknown, one that bridges personal experience, empirical evidence, and collective inquiry. The emotional resonance of the phenomenon cannot be overstated. Fear, awe, fascination, and reflection intertwine, creating a complex emotional landscape that mirrors the complexity of the events themselves. Abductees navigate a duality of terror and insight, trauma and revelation, isolation and shared understanding. This duality reinforces the authenticity of their experiences, demonstrating that these encounters are not simply stories of fear but narratives of profound human and cosmic significance. The cumulative effect of the evidence, testimonies, and personal reflections presented throughout this story is compelling. These encounters are real in their impact, persistent in their recurrence, and significant in their implications. They challenge assumptions about the limits of human perception, the nature of consciousness, and the boundaries of experience. They reveal that extraordinary phenomena can intrude upon the ordinary, reshaping lives in ways that are tangible, measurable, and emotionally resonant. By concluding with reflection rather than resolution, the narrative preserves the tension and mystery that define these experiences. The phenomenon remains open-ended, encouraging viewers to continue questioning, exploring, and observing. The invitation is clear: remain vigilant, share insights, and consider that the extraordinary may be closer than anticipated. These stories are not confined to the pages of history or the recordings of memory. They are unfolding now, in lives and landscapes familiar yet transformed by the inexplicable. Ultimately, the evidence, personal testimonies, physical anomalies, and emotional resonance coalesce to affirm a simple but profound conclusion: these encounters are too convincing to ignore. They demand attention, scrutiny, and respect. They leave an indelible imprint on those who experience them, challenging conventional understanding and compelling humanity to reflect on its place in a universe that may be far larger and more complex than previously imagined. By leaving the audience with lingering questions and a sense of curiosity, the narrative completes its arc. From ordinary life to extraordinary experience, from disorientation to insight, and from isolated encounters to collective significance. Viewers are invited not only to witness these accounts but to engage with them, to contemplate their own experiences, and to remain open to the possibility that the unknown is always closer than it seems. In this way, the conclusion mirrors the structure of the phenomenon itself, both unsettling and illuminating, mysterious yet tangible, personal yet universal. The stories compel reflection, the evidence demands consideration, and the unanswered questions leave the mind alert, contemplative, and aware. It is in this intersection of fear, awe, and reflection that the true impact of these abduction experiences is felt, ensuring that they remain unforgettable and, as the title insists, too convincing to ignore.